What's up, everyone? This is Robbie from Ratchet Motors, and we're getting back into our F100 project. So, long story short, we got a aftermarket steering column, steering wheel, shift linkages. The goal for this video is to get the truck steering and shifting through the gears, which essentially is all we need for the truck to be drivable. In our previous video, we got a new master cylinder installed, so it can technically stop. In a first video, we actually showed that the motor does run, so we know it runs. So now the goal is to really get it driving. So steering and going through the gears is really the focus here. And the reason we have an aftermarket steering column is originally it was a 3 on the tree manual. Now we have a C6 auto. So we're going to use this aftermarket steering column to connect to our Crown Vic power steering rack, as well as get our automatic shifting. So park, reverse, neutral, drive, along with some of those gears there. So that's everything we have for this video. We'll see how it goes. All right, so first things first, I'm gonna get the steering column mocked up. I do have two different size steering wheels that I'm gonna try out. I think the other steering wheel I might do in a giveaway. Let me know if you guys are interested in something like that. We're pretty close to 5,000 subscribers, so maybe it'll be like a 5,000 subscriber giveaway. We'll give away the other steering wheel, but we do have two here to kind of try things out. The first thing I'm gonna do is get the column in place. It's actually in the truck here. So this is a Flaming River steering column. I can put the specs and the part number in the description. It comes with this extra floor plate. I just got a universal one because there wasn't really one for the F100 in the 62 model year. So the goal here is to get the floor plate somewhat mocked up where I want it on the floor, get the column in place with the column hanger. So I will need probably a bracket. I'll need to build some type of bracket to attach this to the dash in the 62 there. We have like our different levers and things like that, and then our shift linkage. So this is going to actually connect to the C6. So there's going to be a little bit of trial and error getting the column in the right location, making sure I can shift the transmission correctly with all the pieces. I do believe I have everything I need here. Again, to connect to my steering column, I can show you. I also have, let me grab this piece, a couple other pieces here. So I also have this, and I can put all of these part numbers in the description. But this is to actually adapt to the Crown Vic power steering rack, and this is a collapsible column. So this gives us a little bit of safety, so this doesn't come flying through the car if there ever were an accident. This will actually collapse on impact rather than kind of stabbing me or something like that coming in through the actual cab there. So this is pretty common. As a nice upgrade here, it does go down from the Crown Vic. This will adapt to my steering column, my steering shaft. I also have here, I'm just kind of showing all the random pieces. I also have these guys. So because I'm probably going to be adding in another union to get the right angle to go to my steering column, I'm going to have a support here. I'll have to mount that up in a location to keep the steering shaft from binding, from wobbling, anything like that. So again, that's what we're going to work on this video. The first thing I'm actually going to do is just tape up the steering column. I've already got it a little marred up because I've had it for a while and just moving around and things like that. It has got a couple scuffs. I'm going to tape it up, so hopefully for the rest of kind of mocking up and installation, I won't get any more scratches on it. So it didn't come that way. That was all on me. And then the other thing I'll have to figure out, the last thing will be the wiring, which shouldn't be too bad here because the car's pretty simple. All right, so one of the first problems we really need to solve here is getting this, I guess you say, the column hanger mounted to my dash. Now it's a little hard to see because it's dark in here, but I do have some original mounting holes. Problem is nothing lines up. It's like not centered. It's not wide enough, the bracket I have compared to the opening. So what I'm going to do is actually make an intermediate piece. Actually, funny enough, I have this piece of cast aluminum that's been just sitting around in my scrap forever. Actually, when I used to have my sheet metal brake, this was just on the cart when I bought it all. I'm going to cut this to length. I think I'll tap holes in it for this piece to connect, and I'll do some through holes for it to connect to the mounting holes I already have in the dash. I need to figure this all out so I can get the column mounted in the car, so then I can align up my little floor plate, and then I can actually figure out all of my shaft and my linkages. So it all kind of comes down to getting this in a place where we can confidently and consistently mount it, so I know as I start to trim, fit things up, the column isn't moving. So you got to get this mounted into the car, and then everything kind of falls into place from there. All right, so far things are moving actually a lot better than expected. I got my 2 holes cut in here. And again, that's gonna be how I actually mount to the car itself, mount to the dash. And then I will make 2 holes threaded for how I can actually mount this little bracket here. Now I do need to trim off one end just a little bit. There's a step in the dash area. So I'm gonna sand or kind of grind that down first. One thing I will say is it was super easy to cut the holes, a lot easier than I expected. This is aluminum here. I'm not sure the exact, uh, might be like I don't know, 60, 61 or something. I'm not sure the exact alloy or content, whatever you want to say there. But what I will say is it was super easy, just going very, very slow, and I worked my way up. So this is a 5/16 hole. I started with 1/8. I went to 3/16, basically a quarter, and then I finished at 5/16. And it was actually super easy. Just went really slow on the drill and applied a little pressure there. So I'm gonna get this kind of fit to the dash, and then I'll mark exactly where I want the center location. Keep in mind it does have some adjustability, so I will be able to slide in and out. But part of the problem currently is the way and I can kind of show this in the truck itself, but the way that the steering column originally mounted was not actually centered with the gauge cluster there. So my goal is to also center things here a little bit. So I'll move it offset from where it originally was, but actually in a kind of a more aesthetic location right in the center where that RPM, excuse me, not where the RPM, where my where my odometer is. It doesn't actually have a gauge for RPM. Now I'm losing odometer. Oh, sorry, speedometer. It has a speedometer. It does not have an odometer. But long story short, I'm going to get the steering column centered by kind of the stack of the plate and that bracket there. And then I can just fit it to the little hole in the floor, and I should be able to cut my steering shaft and check my, my shift linkages. All right, so I'm pretty stoked about this. You'll see got the 2 outer holes are to mount to the dash, and now I have my 2 inner holes that are threaded here that I can use to mount my little steering rack mount. So I'm gonna get that right in the car. Keep in mind, this is just the whole chunk. I'm gonna cut off most of this when I'm done, but I just left a lot of material to make it easier to clamp, easier to work with. So I'm gonna try fitting this in as is. So we'll move over to the car now. All right, it was just getting a little tricky to film, but this is where we're at. Got the column in using our little adapter. Now really the tricky thing for me is figuring out the depth in and out that I want the column. So that, get over here, I can both, we see the tail end or the kind of end of the column down there. I need to be able to attach to my steering shaft, which is coming from the rack and pinion. I also, it's a little hard to see here, but I also need to be able to attach to my shifter or my shift rod, my shift linkage for the transmission. So it's a little bit of a balance here of how deep I want the steering column going into the engine bay, and then how long my steering shaft will be, as long as I can reach those different shift linkages. So I actually need to go in here and trim this little panel piece. This is a universal kind of like kick panel, floor panel for the column. I'm gonna trim it down so that I can move the column upwards, get it a little bit higher away from the frame. I'm kind of going back and forth here. Because then once I'm higher up from the frame, looks like I'll actually have a straight shot from the steering column to the steering shaft. And it looks like I'll even be able to clearance the actual headers there. So I'm gonna try to first cut down that piece and slowly work everything together. I think I'm also gonna attach my shift linkage so I can make sure I can actually go through the gears here. So we're actually getting a lot closer than I thought, and it's moving pretty quickly here as far as the steering side of things. So now you can see I took a little bit off this plate so I can tuck it up higher under the dash. And this should be everything we need to get it actually lined up here. I'm super excited and actually surprised that this is fitting together better than I expected. All right, we got the column back in. Got that plate trimmed up a little bit so now I can really tuck up in there. Things are looking really good. There's gonna be a little forward and back movement still till I get that perfect. But you can see in here now, just a little close to the header, which I can probably clearance if I need to. And then otherwise, we're looking really good as we connect to the steering column. So I do, and you can kind of see right back just behind the steering column. Let me try to point with my finger right back. Where's my finger? Right back there area is where we connect with the shift linkages. So that's the next thing I'm gonna kind of test a bit before I go cutting anything or making room for the steering linkage. All right, so the fit is actually so tight here that I decided to countersink one of these holes so that I can actually let that little steering column mount slide over it. And I'll show what I mean there in just a second. But you can see I countersunk this, and this is actually really easy just using one of these little Harbor Freight countersinking tools. All right, so you can see that little countersunk bolt allowed me to slide this all the way over. Ignore all the scratches on this column. That's just me being an idiot. But we have our final fitment. This is like super ideal. I just don't know forward and back. I might need to actually push it back in a little bit. I think I'm gonna get some of the controls and the steering wheel all in just to get that final depth. But this means I can get the shift linkages in place. I can get my steering shaft in place, and everything's all gonna start coming together here. So this really was kind of one of the biggest blocks, if you will, biggest Lego pieces that has now fallen into place, and it's all because of this little bracket here. So I kept pushing off making that little bracket. We finally have it. Again, just gonna start figuring out the exact length, kind of fit myself into the car, and then from there, steering shaft, shift linkages. I need to get my transmission lines to the cooler. I need to get my power steering lines. I'm still not sure if I'm gonna have time to hook up the electric pump for the drive over to the new place, so I might just do some kind of loop just so there's fluid in a reservoir. But gotta move quick here. I have about 5 more days, I think it is, to get this all together running and at least driving enough to go about 8 miles to the next place. All right, so the good news is we got the column in place, and it might be hard to tell now, but basically things are a lot better than I expected. I won't need to add in another union in the middle here anywhere. I won't need to add in a steering support. I can actually do a straight shot from the column to the rack here with just a U-joint on either end, which means I don't need a support. This is the best case scenario. So for now, I'm gonna leave the steering shaft as is. I'm not gonna cut it down quite yet. I'm gonna start fitting up my shift linkage. So if you look really closely there, you can see I've added the little linkage bracket to the bottom of my column. It's gonna have to come out just a little bit. We're really close to the floor there, not a big deal. And we gotta get our bar fitted to reach over to the shifter or the linkage, the arm, if you will, on the transmission. So I'm gonna get the package together here and start fitting it up. I can actually show you, it's just on the table here, a little messy. I'm trying out the 2 different steering wheels. I'll show you guys near the end of the video. We have a bigger one here that I think is 15 inches, and then a smaller one, which I think is 13 inches. I'd have to look back at them, but I actually thought I was gonna like the smaller one at first. The bigger one may look a little bit better, but I'll show that at the end of the video and give everyone a chance to kind of figure that one out. Now what we do need is get these shift linkages in here. And this was just a kit that came from Jegs, aftermarket universal kit for C4 and C6 transmissions for column linkage. So I'm gonna get these pieces out, start fitting it together. It's gotta be cut to fit. So that's where we're at next here. If I can get through the gears, we're in a really, really good place. All right, so something with the steering column that was extremely tricky is you do have to get a little spring in here so that you can get kind of like your gear shift spring loaded. Now, this was extremely tricky. It sits in a pocket in here, and you have to get it to sit there without falling in, which I did do one time. It actually fell in the casting. I had to take it out of the car, flip it all over and everything. The trick I ended up working out with was a little zip tie. I actually used a zip tie, pushed it down the casting itself. I actually put it down the collar, and I used that as kind of like my sleeve for the spring, pulled it out as I was getting the lever in. So if you ever get to that point, definitely try using a zip tie there. I'm gonna finish putting it together, get it in the car. We'll do the shift linkage and the steering shaft. All right, so I have to take the wheel off and jack it up just to get in here a little bit better. We're gonna put the transmission in park now, take that shift arm off, and then I'll put my new shift arm from the Jegs kit in there. So I think I'm actually not right here. So it looks like because this might have come out of a floor shift car and I'm trying to do column shift. So it looks like it actually moves in the opposite direction. Now I might be able to rig something up if I go kind of backwards. But I think I might have the wrong parts here. So I'm gonna try to rig some things together. I think basically, if you think of my shift arm on that column as a clock, I have it moving from say like 12 o'clock to 7. I'm wondering if I put it at say like 6 o'clock and have it rotate from 6 to say 11 or 6 to 1, the other side of the clock, basically counterclockwise, if I'll be able to get the transmission to pull. So I'm gonna try that just for the sake of trying it. All right, so I was just getting ahead of myself. The shift linkage is on the end of my steering shaft or my steering column. See there, I have the other steering arm kind of locked in. And now what I need to, kind of zoom in there, what I need to do is just cut that metal shaft there to length so that I can attach it to my shift arm. Now you can see my exhaust is really, really close there. I might see if I can snap this on the outside. That might not be possible, but we're gonna try it out here. I'm gonna do whatever I can to avoid the exhaust, but we'll see how we get. So I'll let you guys know as I get closer here. It's a little hard to film because it's hot and it's just hard to see down there. So I'm doing my best, but I will show everyone once it's together and kind of going through the gears. All right, so I got really brave. I bent the shift linkage here so I can now clearance my exhaust, and this should be going right on in a moment. So I'm gonna just get it all mocked up, get it cut to length, and we'll be good to go on shifting, hopefully. All right, so here's where we're at with the shift linkage. I marked 2 little spots on it where I'm gonna grind flat. It's kind of hard to see there. And blue, those 2 spots I'm gonna grind flat. There we go. And that'll just be for the set screws on the other side here. And then we'll get in the car. So should be shifting in just a moment here. All right, that is a big item off the list there. We have our shift linkage. It's actually working as expected. I'm super surprised. When I get a hand, I'll actually show you guys. I can't really film and go through it at the same time here, but I'm really happy with that. I can get through all the gears. It actually lines up pretty well on the column as well. Can't really celebrate too much. We got to get the union in here for the steering shaft, and then pretty much everything steering will be complete other than the power steering pump, that electric Volvo power steering pump. Well, Ford made for Volvo power steering pump. So we're just chipping away at the list here, trying to wrap up everything on steering, still gonna bleed the brakes, still gotta get the alternator working, and then we should be able to actually drive this, surprising or not. All right, and the steering shaft is falling into place. I trimmed it back so I could start to actually mark it up closer. And remember, you always gotta leave a little room so it can fully move the joint itself there. We're looking pretty close. It looks like it's gonna clear. I'll only be able to tell once we really have it out there. But that should only be a moment from now. So getting really, really close. I'm gonna trim it back once more, probably to its final fit. And then I'll show you all how it fits in here. And I'm so happy that's just gonna be one straight shot here rather than having a bunch of unions and supports and everything else. So that just worked out really well also. All right, I am super excited. This actually came together even quicker than the shifting. So watch our steering shaft here as I turn the wheels. That is good news. That means we got to start turning, steering, shifting truck. I don't have power steering yet. We probably won't for the initial drive, but even this rack is going to be a lot better than the original gear box, I think you'd say, or steering box in the original truck. Now I just have to dimple a couple of different holes here to mark the steering shaft, and then we're done. That's the shifting, that's the steering. This is now an automatic column shift power steering, essentially power steering truck. What is up, everyone? It's been a long time since we filmed last. Got super backed up with the move, still trying to get the truck out of here. This is the last day. This is kind of like more than the last day. Our previous landlord was nice enough to let us kind of use the garage for a little bit longer. So some things that we missed filming just because I was in such a rush. We do have the brake split now. This was a big problem I dealt with yesterday. At first, I thought I might have tripped the actual proportioning valve because I stepped on the brakes without any fluid in the system. What I actually learned was, first of all, almost every single union was loose. Once we tightened those all up, my rear lead screws were actually seized. So even though I was trying to bleed, nothing was coming out. It wasn't until I fully took the bleed screw off, we got a big bubble pop, and all the brakes are now more or less functioning. There's still some air in the lines, not a big deal. We're no longer planning on driving it to the new house. We just need to drive enough to go onto the trailer. So if you look closely here, and again, I know it's been a little bit crazy. You got a steering wheel in, shifting through the gears. I actually do have park, I do have neutral. I'm going to try to see if I have drive once the car is running. I can easily get this up and running again because it's a carbureted, so it's nice and simple. It's a wire and some fuel hose. I'm just kind of chipping away at things here. Worst comes to worst, at least the car's not in a state where it can be pushed. It can be safely held on a trailer, having parked in an emergency brake. I got the drive shaft in. So yeah, just chipping away. I do have speed bleeders for the brakes, just probably not gonna have time to install them. And this is really not a big point. The brakes are holding fluid now. I'll put the speed beaters on when I get them over to the new unit. I'm dying here, it's hot, it's brutal, I'm in a rush. I still have, you can see the garage is mostly empty here, but I do still have a little bit to go. So we're gonna keep chipping away at things. Again, drive shaft. The next thing I'm actually gonna look into is just tightening up any of the rear suspension. I'm gonna put the front end of the truck down, put air in the tires, and start thinking about transmission fluid and how I'm actually gonna get that motor running again. I gotta get the plug cell connected, I gotta get the starter wire connected to the starter, and at minimum, I gotta have the ignition coil ignited. So here we go. All right, another update, because it's a little hard to film while you're having a heat stroke, but what we have here is I actually had a starter wire already on the starter from the 460. I ran it up right to the starter solenoid in my 62. It turns over on the key. I don't have a battery in here, but I tested it just a moment ago. I got my fuel line set up here, and I'd like people to let me know. This is something I never understood. Down here, my fuel pump looks like it has 2 outlets. Let me know why that would be. I'm new to the 460s. I'm new to big blocks. Why do I have 2 outlets? Is that to just feel a dual bowl carb or what? Other thing left here is the resistor for the igniter. Because I'm using one of these big ass HEI units, I don't need the resistor anymore. So I'm gonna actually cut across that with one of these slick little, where are these guys? One of these little connectors. These are actually called Wagos. It's actually from the lighting company I worked at. I still have a bunch of these just from other times. So I'm just gonna Wago across the resistor rather than going through the resistor. So I'm just bridging and not using the resistor. So basically, surprising as it is, this is ready to fire up. I need to get fuel into the car, and then it might actually night off. Now I gotta be careful because I do have the drive shaft attached. We should be in park, but these are things I have the back end up on a lift, and I will put this on a tripod now that we're actually at a point where it'll be a little easier to film. I do have the back tires up, so we're gonna see what happens here if I go to start it and put it in gear. Literally have no idea what happened. All I do is turn it over once more and it's sparked up. So we're going to take a look. That's not a little loud. It runs though. Alright, we're gonna try it again. Hopefully this time without the geyser. Just need more transmission fluid, I think. Wheels aren't spinning when I put it into gear, but that might be okay. All right, so unfortunately filming got cut short in that last video. It was getting really late. I think it was about 3 in the morning, maybe 4 in the morning by the time we got that loaded up on the U-Haul. But just a summary, we did not have a throttle linkage at that time, so the truck could only idle, which was great to move it around the driveway, move it around the street. It was still pretty difficult to get it onto the car trailer. Luckily I had my wife there. Between the two of us, a little bit of elbow grease, we did get the truck up on the trailer, and you can see we now have it in our new garage. You'll see behind me, I also have the bug here. Now the bug was a lot easier. We do still have some starting inconsistencies, which has been very, very frustrating, but the bug did start, same idea. We just started, rolled it up on the trailer, drove it over, and now both the vehicles are at our new location. This is about 2 weeks later now, because between filming, unpacking, editing, this is where we're at. Already have some more work going on the truck, but that's everything we're going to include for this video. Just know the truck runs, drives, turns, and stops now. Great news. Now in the next video, which we've already started filming, we're going to get the alternator on the truck, we're going to get the radiator permanently installed, get the electric power steering pump installed. So this truck is actually getting closer and closer to daily driver duty. At this point, as I'm filming right now, the truck is almost ready to go up and drive on probably a multi-hour drive. We just got to get everything squared away. Big one still left is the fuel tank, but we'll see that all in our next video. So as always, thank you everyone for watching, for joining in. I hope you like what you saw. If you do, hit a like button. Be sure to leave a comment. I always respond if you leave a comment. I really appreciate that interaction. Subscribe for more content and share with your friends.